She was standing on my doorstep at 11:30 at night, and I almost didn't recognize her. That's the part that still gets me when I think about it. My own sister. My twin. The person who shares my face, my blood, my earliest memories. And I almost didn't recognize her because of what he had done to her. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut. There was a cut along her jaw that had dried but hadn't been cleaned. She was holding her arm against her side in that careful, deliberate way people do when breathing hurts, and she was trying to smile. She was standing there looking like that, and she was trying to smile because she didn't want me to panic. "Hey," she said. I didn't say anything. I just pulled her inside. Her name is Cassie. Cassandra Marie Hollister, same last name as mine, before I kept it after my divorce. We're both Hollisters, both 31, born 14 minutes apart on a Tuesday in late October. She got the calm, and I got the stubborn. That's what our mother always said. Cassie was the one who thought before she spoke. I was the one who said the thing and then thought about the consequences afterward. I was a canine handler with the county sheriff's department. Had been for going on 6 years. I'd seen things on the job that most people never have to see, and I thought that had made me harder to shock. I thought I had developed some kind of professional distance from the worst of what people do to each other. I was wrong, because nothing in 6 years of law enforcement prepared me for seeing my sister standing in my doorway like that. I brought her to the kitchen table. I got a clean cloth and warm water. I sat across from her and started cleaning the cut on her jaw, and she sat very still and let me, the way she used to when we were kids, and I'd clean up her scraped knees after she fell off her bike. "Tell me," I said. She didn't answer right away. She looked at the table, at her hands, at the salt shaker, anywhere but at me, Cassie. "It was just an argument," she said. I didn't say anything to that. We were arguing about money and it got out of hand and... Stop. I set the cloth down. Don't do that. Not with me. She finally looked at me. Her good eye filled up, and she pressed her lips together the way she always does when she's trying not to cry. The small, tight line that I have seen on her face my whole life. And something in me went very quiet and very cold at the same time. His name was Troy. Troy Whitfield. She had met him 4 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding, and I had never liked him, not from the first time she brought him home for Thanksgiving, and he spent the entire dinner talking about himself. But Cassie loved him, or she thought she did. And he was charming in the way that certain men are charming, smooth and attentive in public, completely different behind closed doors. They got married 18 months after they met. I was her maid of honor. I stood up there in a pale blue dress and watched her walk down that aisle, and I pushed every bad feeling I had about him down as deep as it would go, because she was happy. She looked genuinely happy. And I thought maybe I was wrong about him. I wasn't wrong. It started, she told me that night at my kitchen table about 8 months into the marriage. Small things at first. He'd take her phone and go through her messages, then get angry about conversations that were completely innocent. He stopped wanting her to see her friends, then her co-workers, then me. He told her what to wear. He took over their bank account, their joint account that he'd convinced her to open, and gave her a weekly allowance like she was a child. She had her own income. She worked as a dental hygienist, but her direct deposit went into that account and he controlled all of it. And then about a year ago, it stopped being just controlling. It got physical. The first time he said it would never happen again, she said. Her voice was flat, the flatness of someone who had already spent too much time inside their own head with something, turning it over and over until it went smooth. I believed him. I know how that sounds. It doesn't sound like anything, I said. It sounds like what happens. The second time he cried, he was so. She stopped. He was convincing. He's always been convincing. How many times, Cassie? She was quiet. How many times before tonight? I stopped counting, she said, very quietly. Somewhere around 7. I got up and stood at the kitchen sink with my back to her for a minute. I needed a moment where she couldn't see my face. I gripped the edge of the counter and I breathed and I looked out the window at the dark backyard and I thought about every single thing I had learned in 6 years of law enforcement about domestic violence cases, about how they go, about the conviction rates, about how many times a victim goes back before they leave for good, if they leave at all, about what happens to the ones who never make it out. I thought about my sister's face when she walked down that aisle. I turned back around. Where does he think you are right now? She blinked. I told him I was going to the pharmacy. For aspirin. Does he know where I live? He knows generally. He doesn't know your exact address. A pause. I made sure of that. Good. She had been careful enough for that, at least. Okay, I said. You're staying here tonight. We'll figure out the rest in the morning. I can't just... Cassie. I sat back down and waited until she looked at me. You came here tonight. You drove here with your eyes swollen shut at midnight. Some part of you already made a decision. I'm just asking you to let me help you act on it. She stayed. She slept in my guest room and I sat on the couch with my dog, a German shepherd named Scout, and I did not sleep at all. The problem, I learned over the following week, was evidence. I knew this from work. I knew it the way you know the shape of a problem before you've even fully looked at it. Troy Whitfield had no prior record. Cassie had never called the police, not once, because he had told her very carefully, very specifically, what would happen to her if she did. He had told her that no one would believe her, that she'd lose everything, that he'd make sure of it. He was also, as it turned out, distantly related to a county commissioner. That was the kind of thing that shouldn't matter, and sometimes very much does. Cassie had no photos, no documentation, no witnesses. She had my word that I'd seen her injuries, but I was her sister, and defense attorneys love to take apart testimony from family members. She also, within 3 days of staying at my place, started talking about going back. I cannot describe to you what it feels like to watch someone you love go through that. To watch them talk themselves back toward the thing that's hurting them. She had reasons. She always had reasons. The house was in his name. She had things there. She couldn't just abandon her whole life. He'd been texting her, apologetic, the kind of messages I recognized immediately as the script that men like him use to reel people back in. She showed me one of them and I had to put her phone face down on the table so I didn't throw it. He's going to do it again, I said. You don't know that, Cassie. I looked at her. You know that? She looked away. We sat in silence for a long time. Scout put his head on her knee and she stroked his ears without seeming to notice she was doing it. What I need, she said finally, is proof. If I had proof, I could do something. I could go to a lawyer with something real. She was right. Without documentation, she was looking at a long, expensive legal fight against a man who had more resources than she did, and apparently at least one friend in county government. She needed something concrete. I thought about it for 2 days. I turned it over from every angle the way I would a case at work. And then I came to her with the idea that she looked at me like I had lost my mind. No, she said. Just listen. Absolutely not. You're a sheriff's deputy. You'd lose your job. I'm off duty. It would be entirely personal. Rebecca. That's my name. Rebecca Ann Hollister. You cannot go into my house and pretend to be me. Why not? I leaned back. Same face. You said yourself he doesn't know this address. I'll drive your car. I'll use your key. I'll be in your house for maybe 3 hours maximum, and I'll have a body camera running the entire time. And what if he... I'm a canine handler with 6 years of law enforcement experience, and I have a concealed carry permit. I kept my voice even. He is a 43-year-old man who hits women when no one is watching. I am not afraid of Troy Whitfield. She was quiet for a long time. What if he recognizes you? He won't be expecting it. That's half the battle right there. People see what they expect to see. I know your mannerisms, Cassie. I've been watching you my entire life. Your hair is shorter. I'll wear it up the way you do. Another long silence. I don't like this, she said. I know. I hate this. I know. She looked at me for a moment with an expression I remembered from when we were 12 years old, and I'd talked her into jumping off the high dive at the public pool when she was scared, resigned, trusting, despite herself. He usually gets home around 6:30, she said. I went on a Thursday. I borrowed Cassie's car, a silver Honda she'd had since before she met him, one of the few things that was technically hers. I wore my hair in the low knot she always wore, used her lip balm because she told me he'd notice if she wasn't wearing it, and put on a pair of her jeans and one of her sweaters. I drove to her neighborhood in the next county over, and I sat outside for 10 minutes and breathed. The body camera was in the button of the sweater, completely invisible unless you knew it was there. I let myself in with her key at 5:45. The house was clean in that cold, controlled way, nothing out of place, everything at right angles. I had been here exactly twice since they got married. Troy had managed, subtly and then not so subtly, to make Cassie's family feel unwelcome. And both times I had felt the particular discomfort of a house that looks like a home but doesn't feel like one. I went to the kitchen. I started making dinner because Cassie said she always had something started by the time he got home, and if she didn't, there would be a comment, and comments were how it always began. I found pasta in the cabinet and sauce, and I started water boiling, and I stood at the stove, and I was aware of every single sound the house made. He came in at 6:22. I heard the garage door, then the door from the garage into the mudroom, then his footsteps. I kept my back to him and focused on the stove, and I thought, this is just a job, just a scene. You've walked into harder situations than this. You're making pasta? He sounded almost surprised. Not a greeting, no hey or hi or any acknowledgement that she was a person he was glad to see. Thought I'd try something simple tonight, I said. Cassie's cadence, lighter than mine, less clipped. I heard him set his keys down. The familiar sound of a man moving through his own territory. We need to talk about the bank account, he said. I turned around then, slowly, the way Cassie would. Not sudden. Careful. He was standing at the kitchen island, loosening his tie, not really looking at me yet. Average height, sandy hair going gray at the temples, the kind of face that probably looked trustworthy to strangers. He was not an imposing man. That was somehow the worst part of it. He was just a man, completely ordinary, and he had made my sister feel like she deserved what he did to her. What about it? I said. He looked up. For 1 second, just a fraction of a second, something moved across his face. A flicker. Then it was gone, and he was looking at me the same way he always must have looked at her. Like she was something slightly disappointing that he had decided to keep anyway. There was a transfer out that I didn't authorize, he said. $60. To a Venmo account I don't recognize. That would be the $20 Cassie had borrowed from a co-worker for gas and paid back, she'd told me. He monitored every transaction. Every single one. It was for Denise, I said. Cassie's co-worker. I owed her for covering a shift. You should have asked me first. It was $60, Troy. Something shifted in the room. The temperature didn't change, and the light didn't change, and nothing visible changed, but something shifted, and I understood viscerally, in the way that your body understands things before your brain catches up, why Cassie had learned to be so careful with her words. I don't think you understand how this works, he said. Very calm, very measured. I've explained this. I understand fine. He set down the tie, took a step around the island. You're being disrespectful? I'm stating a fact. Another step. I don't like your tone. And there it was. The camera and my button was recording everything. I kept my posture exactly the way Cassie would, slightly turned, not confrontational, because she had learned not to be confrontational, because confrontational made it worse. I watched him move, and I catalogued everything. The deliberate invasion of space. The voice that stayed calm while the words built a wall you couldn't climb. "We've had this conversation," he said. "Close now. Too close. I've been very patient. Very clear. And you keep," he paused, his jaw working, "you keep pushing." "I borrowed $60 from a coworker," I said quietly. "That's all." His hand moved. Fast. Faster than I expected, actually, which told me something about how long he'd been getting away with this, and he grabbed my arm above the elbow. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. My other hand came up, and I broke the grip. Clean. Fast. The way you practice it until it's reflex. He stumbled slightly from the unexpectedness of it. I stepped back, put the kitchen island between us, and looked at him. His face was something I will not forget. The surprise. The recalculation happening in real time. He was looking at me and something wasn't adding up for him. "What the—" "I'm not Cassie," I said. Silence. "My name is Rebecca Hollister. I'm Cassie's twin sister. I'm also a deputy with the sheriff's department, and you have been recorded for the last 47 minutes. I reached up and unclipped the camera from the sweater button and held it up. "Everything you just did. Everything you said. And camera." He stared at it. Then at me. Then at it. "That's—" He started and stopped. "You can't. I want you to think very carefully about what you're about to say to me." My voice was completely steady. "I want you to think about the recording, and I want you to think about the fact that my sister has injuries that were documented and photographed this week. And then I want you to think about what your next move actually is." He thought about it. He was smart enough to be calculating. I could see it happening. "This is entrapment," he said finally. "You can't use any of that. I'm not a law enforcement officer acting in my official capacity. I'm a private citizen in a home my sister has legal residency in, with a camera that I brought myself. But you're welcome to make that argument to an attorney." I watched his face. "It'll be an interesting conversation. She put you up to this. She asked for help. I gave it." I set the camera on the counter, face up, still recording. "Here's what's going to happen, Troy. Cassie is going to get a lawyer. You're going to hear from that lawyer. And in the meantime, you're going to leave her completely alone. No texts. No calls. No showing up at her job, or anywhere near it. You can't tell me I'm not done." I waited. "She has people now. You didn't know that, but she does. She has me. She has people at her job. She has a case she's building and a sister who is very, very good at gathering evidence and who will show up every single time." I held his gaze. "Are we clear?" He didn't answer. "I need to hear that we're clear." Another pause, the longest of my life probably. Then, "Fine." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a confession. It was the sound of a man who had never been faced with consequences, doing a rapid reassessment of his situation. And it was enough. The legal process was not fast, and it was not easy, and I want to be honest about that because I've seen enough made-up stories that skip this part. Cassie retained a lawyer, a woman named Frances who had worked family law for 20 years and who looked at the footage and the photographs and said, "Okay, this is workable." It took 4 months. There were hearings. Troy hired an attorney of his own, a good one, and they tried several arguments about the recording that Frances methodically dismantled. The connection to the county commissioner turned out to be more distant and less relevant than we'd feared. Cassie and I told our mother 6 weeks in. That conversation was its own kind of difficult. Mom had liked Troy. She had liked him genuinely. The way you like someone who has practiced being likable. And the process of understanding what had been happening under the surface while she smiled at him at Christmas. That took time. She got there. She's stubborn in her own way, our mother. There were days when Cassie wanted to give up. I won't pretend otherwise. There were days when it was exhausting and expensive, and she missed the version of her life she had imagined she was going to have. And she grieved that version even though she knew what it had actually been. Grief doesn't wait for the facts to be convenient. But she didn't go back. The divorce was finalized on a Wednesday. I drove her to the courthouse and we sat in the parking lot afterward, and she was very quiet for a while. You know what I keep thinking about? She said. What? That night I drove to your house. I almost didn't. She was looking out the windshield. I sat in the driveway for like 10 minutes. I told myself I was being dramatic, that I should just go home. I didn't say anything. I think about that. What would have happened if I'd gone home? I reached over and took her hand. We sat there in the courthouse parking lot. Two 31-year-old women with the same face and very different years behind us, and I held her hand and neither of us said anything for a while. Scout was in the back seat. He put his head over the console and rested it on her shoulder, and she laughed, a real one, and pressed her face into his fur. Here is what I know now, that I want to put into words, because I've thought about it a lot. Nobody prepares you for the specific way it feels to realize that someone you love has been going through something terrible and you didn't know. The guilt of that is its own thing. I have been over every visit, every phone call, every holiday, looking for the moment I should have seen it and didn't. I've made my peace with most of it, but I haven't forgotten it, and I don't think I should. It keeps me paying attention. I also know that Cassie is one of the lucky ones, not because what happened to her was anything less than serious, but because she had somewhere to go. She had a person to drive to at midnight. She had resources. She had me, yes, but also an income and a profession and a lawyer she could eventually afford. I think about the women who don't have those things. I think about them a lot. I bring it with me to work. Troy completed a court-ordered counseling program. Whether it changed anything about him, I genuinely don't know. I hope it did. I am not a person who wants him to be the worst version of himself forever. I just want him nowhere near my sister. Cassie has a small apartment 2 miles from mine. She has a cat she named herself, which sounds like a small thing and isn't. She has her job and her coworker Denise, who has become a real friend, and she has Saturday dinners at Mom's, and she has Scout getting dog hair on her work clothes every single time she comes over. She has herself back. That's the thing I keep coming back to. She has herself back, the self that was there before a man decided she wasn't a person with her own interior life, but just a thing in his house that was supposed to behave a certain way. That self is still a little careful, still a little quiet in ways she wasn't before, but she's coming back. I can see it. I know her face better than I know my own. She told me recently that she'd started talking to a therapist. She's good, Cassie said. She asks hard questions. That's the sign of a good one, I said. She nodded slowly. She asked me what I would say to myself, to the version of me that almost didn't get out of the car that night. A pause. I didn't have an answer right away, but I've been thinking about it. What did you come up with? Cassie looked at me, and she smiled. Not the trying not to fall apart smile from the doorstep, not the careful public smile she'd worn for years in that house, the real one, the one I've known since we were born. I'd tell her that showing up is enough, she said. Just getting out of the car. That's enough. Someone will be at the door. I was at the door. I'll always be at the door. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in an abstract way. In the very specific, concrete way that you think about something when you've lived it. Troy didn't become the man who grabbed my sister's arm in one day. That's the thing people don't always want to sit with because it's more comfortable to believe that people like him are just born different, fundamentally other, easy to spot. But that's not how it works. It happens in increments. First he controlled the money. Then he controlled her schedule. Then her friendships, then her sense of what was normal and what she deserved. Each step made the next one easier, and by the time his behavior turned physical, she had already been so thoroughly reshaped by everything that came before it that she questioned whether what was happening to her was even real. That's not weakness. I want to be clear about that. That is what happens to an intelligent, capable person when someone methodically dismantles their ability to trust their own judgment. Cassie is one of the sharpest people I know. She is thoughtful and perceptive, and she is not naive. And it still happened to her. So I have no patience for the version of this story where the victim should have just known better or gotten out sooner. The circumstances he built around her were designed specifically to make leaving feel impossible. He was good at it. That's the honest truth. What I keep coming back to is the decision she made anyway. She drove to my house. She sat in that driveway for 10 minutes, second-guessing herself, and then she got out of the car. After everything he had done to make her feel like she had no one and nowhere to go, some part of her remembered that she did. That one decision, that single act of choosing to move towards something instead of retreating back to what was familiar and dangerous, is what changed everything that followed. Not me going to that house. Not the camera or the lawyer or the court dates. Her. Getting out of the car. I think about that whenever I feel like a situation is too far gone to do anything about. There is almost always one small action available. One door you haven't tried. One person you haven't called. The whole thing doesn't have to be solved in a single moment. You just have to take the next available step and trust that the steps after it will become visible once you're moving. The other thing I've learned is that showing up for someone is not a one-time event. It's a practice. I had to keep showing up. Through the months when Cassie wanted to quit, through the hard legal process, through the grief of the life she thought she was going to have. Real support is not dramatic and it is not always visible. A lot of it is just being present in ordinary, unglamorous ways. Driving someone to an appointment. Sitting with them when they cry without trying to fix it. Answering the phone. I'm a better sister now than I was before this. I hate that it took this to get me there, but I'm honest enough to say it. Cassie is doing the work of rebuilding herself, and she is doing it with real courage. The quiet, daily kind that nobody outside your close circle ever sees. That kind of courage doesn't get celebrated the way it should. I'm celebrating it here. If you are in a situation that looks anything like what she was in, I want you to know one thing. The door exists. Someone is on the other side of it. You just have to get out of the car.